past accomplishments, but his overcoming of difficulties and the future that he will allow us to lead with your help as students. So it is my pleasure and a deep personal privilege to present to you the former Attorney General and the former Governor of New York. But before he gets up here, it is also a pleasure to introduce or to present to you a person who needs no introduction, Dean Hadi, for the presentation of some gifts.
Mr. Spitzer, on behalf of my students, who I love the most, and my faculty, staff, we appreciate that you came here to share your wisdom on financial meltdown. Some subject that we teach a lot in our classrooms, and your wisdom will be very helpful for us. We appreciate that, and we have a small gift, token of our appreciation to give to you.
Thank you so much. How about if we do this, open the gifts later, so it's, you know, not to see all my loot and then decide I want to leave immediately. It is great to be here. And Steve Poscanger and I, President Poscanger and I were classmates as undergraduates. And we have a vow of silence. Neither of us will acknowledge the sins of the other, although mine, I suppose, are generally well known. But, I will not tell you Steve's, and I can tell you it is, there are none. That's why I'm not telling you. It is, there are people like that, and that's, you know, Stu's introduction of me was very textured and thoughtful, and I appreciate the delicacy of it, and, but it's also important. With respect to Steve, on the other hand, there are no sins, and it is great to be back and see you again. And also, I just want to congratulate you for what you were doing for this campus. I can tell you, as when I was governor, one of the mandates that I thought was most critical for this state was reigniting the excitement and interest and visibility and quality of our SUNY system. And President Poscanger is doing that, and it is at the core of the future of the state. So, Steve, thank you. It is Stu and I, if I'm correct, met on a dark, rainy night up in Essex County when I was traveling around the state campaigning to become Attorney General. And it was torrential rain, and I waded through 6 inches of mud, and it was at moments like that that I wondered why I was pursuing politics as a career, whether it was worth it. And I guess 2 observations from that night. First, a fellow from across the lake came over to speak to us that night. I was one of the 15 candidates, but we had a guest speaker by the name of Howard Dean, who was the governor of Vermont, who spoke with an eloquence that night that was worth listening to. And whatever doubts I had in the middle of the monsoon that we suffered through about the wisdom of participation in politics, listening to him overcame them. And so I want to echo Stuart's point that you, and it's a platitude, it's a cliche, but you are the future. Do not let whatever the cataclysms of the moment may be, the cynicism of the moment, the darkness of finance, politics, our concerns about international relations, dissipate your enthusiasm for working hard in either the public or the private sector, because you can succeed and change the world in either one. So do not look at those of us who are either graying or losing our hair and throw in the towel and lose hope, because really you are the ones who are going to carry that baton forward. And I now have kids who are basically your age, and I try to give them the same speech, but they're my kids, so they don't listen. So hopefully you will listen to all of us who have a common thematic. And the second takeaway from that night is that it's worth it. It was worth it. Ups, downs, peaks and valleys. You know, you get to the top of the Himalayas, and then you see things from a very different perspective. It is all worth it. So I do not for a moment regret the journey I've been on, or regret that I chose several years back when nobody in politics knew who I was. And Stu will tell you, when I showed up at Essex County that day, people said, who is this crazy guy running for Attorney General? I do not regret a single moment of it, and I hope you make a similar choice as you go forward. Well, let me begin this conversation by telling you a little story that A couple years ago, I made a case, I did the Attorney General's office made a case relating to investment banks. I'll talk about it a bit more in a moment. But the case revolved around emails. And we subpoenaed emails from major investment banks, and we're reading through them. And what became very clear was that there were fundamental structural problems in the way they were doing business. And so, one takeaway I hope you leave with today: before you write an email, think very carefully. It will always become public. Do not presume any of your emails are going to be sealed forever, so be wary. I was invited to speak at something called the Institutional Investor Annual Awards Dinner in 2002. And at that dinner, they were going to be giving awards to the Wall Street analysts who had performed the best. We crunched the numbers. We realized that their performance was superb. Those who were getting the gold medal, if you had invested with them, you would have lost 40% of your money. Those who got the silver money, you would have lost 50%, the bronze medal, you would have lost 60%. Absolutely important performance, and we'll talk about that in a moment, perhaps. More relevant, I got up, it was a black tie dinner. There were about 400 or 500 of these very self-confident Wall Street analysts there. They were all making tons of money, even though their clients weren't. And I said to them, it's nice to put faces to the emails. They did not appreciate it. That was when the tomatoes began whistling by my head. They did not like being told what I was about to tell them. Which leads me to another takeaway, which is, it used to be the punchline in a talk I would give about corporate governance, but now I'll throw it out there up front. It applies to everybody, every one of us in life, and I as well, of course. Hubris is terminal. Hubris is terminal. The hubris that overtook Wall Street, the hubris that overtakes people who are elected to positions who think that they therefore somehow can do things they shouldn't do. Wherever you happen to be in life, hubris is terminal. Be wary of it. My dad, who is a product of the Lower East Side, the ghetto, the New York City public schools, of CCNY, when I told him and used this phrase with him, he said, Eliot, when I was in high school and we read the Greek myths in the original Greek, which he always had to show me that my education, which is institutions which we aspired to get into, perhaps was not nearly as good as his public school education. He said, when I was learning that phrase, it was stated as follows: those whom the gods would destroy, they make all powerful. Think about that. Those whom the gods would destroy, they make all powerful. Be wary of those who think they're all powerful. Be wary of those who fall into the trap of thinking they're all powerful, because just as hubris is terminal, that sensibility will overtake one. All right, let me talk about finance, Wall Street, governance in the following way. I want to address three basic questions. The first one is, what are the parameters of government intervention in the marketplace? And the reason I begin with that is that over the last few years, we have gone from Ayn Rand libertarianism to creating in Ken Feinberg a government bureaucrat who has to determine and is empowered to determine what the pay should be of the wealthiest and most well-paid executives on Wall Street. To cross the spectrum that quickly, to go from one extreme to the other without intellectual moorings, without the capacity to actually begin to think about what government does, will leave us rootless. If we can't figure out why government is doing certain things, then we will react to spasms and crises rather than in a thoughtful way that will lead to sound governance. And so I want to see if there is some rationale, some argument or arguments, plural, that we can make that will give us an intellectual framework that will let us explain why we do what we do. Second, I want to ask the question, are we responding well to the immediate crisis? What have we done well or not so well, and where are we failing? And I think that is obviously a critical discussion, a conversation that shifts day to day. Even today, I don't know if he did it, Chris Dodd was going to propose his bill, and obviously we wait to see what, if anything, is in there. And the third question, I know there are a few business school students here, or maybe some faculty members. I want to speak to you for a few moments about corporate governance and where we are with respect to corporate governance, which sounds like an incredibly boring issue, but it is not. It goes to the heart of how we govern ourselves almost as much as issues relating to how we run our democracy in terms of corporate, in terms of individual campaign contributions. We need to think about this critically important issue. So the first question, how and what should government do? Why? How do we create the parameters for it? At the end of this brief conversation, there are going to be three rules, and I'll go through them sequentially. But the first rule is that only government